You were excited, genuinely excited, the kind that starts in your stomach and rises through your chest and makes you speak faster than you normally do. You had something new, a plan, an idea, a direction that felt, for the first time in a long time, like it belonged to you. And you shared it, not with the world, with one person, someone you trusted, someone you believed would understand. You opened your mouth and let the thing you had been quietly building inside yourself pour out, raw, unfinished, still warm from the place where it was born. And their response was not what you needed, not cruelty, nothing that obvious, just a raised eyebrow, a pause that lasted one beat too long, a question that was not really a question, but a small, carefully disguised doubt dressed in the language of concern. Are you sure about that? Or maybe just a sound, a quiet that carried no warmth and no weight, but somehow weighed more than anything they could have said. And you felt it, not in your mind, in your body. The fire that was there a moment ago, bright, alive, pushing you forward, shrank, not from logic, not from argument, from atmosphere. The room changed temperature in a single sentence, and the thing you had been carrying with such certainty suddenly felt fragile, questionable, smaller. You walked away from that conversation with the same plan you walked in with, but it was not the same plan. Something had been taken from it, not by force but by exposure, by being brought into the light before it was ready, by being placed in hands that did not know how to hold it. This is not about secrecy. This is not about distrust. This is about understanding a principle that most people learn too late. Not everything that is true about you needs to be spoken. And not everything that is growing in you survives being seen before it is strong enough to be seen. There are things inside you, forming, healing, shifting, becoming, that are weakened, not by doubt, but by premature exposure. Not because the people around you are bad, but because some things require silence the way seeds require dark soil. Bring them to the surface too early, and they do not grow, they dry out. They lose the protection they needed to become what they were meant to become. There are 5 of these things. 5 territories inside your life that become vulnerable the moment they are shared with someone who does not have the capacity to hold them. Let us walk through them, not as rules to memorize, but as patterns to recognize in the way you have been living. The first is your unfinished goal. You have something you are working toward. Maybe it is new. Maybe it has been quietly developing for months. It does not matter how far along it is. What matters is that it is alive. It has energy. It has momentum. It has a quiet pull that gets you out of bed before the alarm or keeps you thinking after the lights go out. And the impulse to share it is strong. Not because you need help, because the excitement needs somewhere to go. The energy of a new direction is restlessness. It wants to move. It wants to be expressed. It wants to become real in the outside world as quickly as possible. So you tell someone, you describe the plan, you lay out the steps, you speak it into existence, or so you believe. But here is what actually happens. When you speak an unfinished goal out loud, something in your mind registers the speaking as progress. The telling feels like doing. The sharing creates a small burst of the same satisfaction that the actual work would have created. And that satisfaction, premature, unearned, reduces the hunger, the drive, the restless energy that was your fuel. You walk away from the conversation feeling good, feeling lighter. But lighter is not always better. Sometimes lighter means you have released the pressure that was going to push you through the difficult middle, the part of any goal where the excitement fades and only discipline remains. This is not weakness. The impulse to share is natural. Human beings are social. We organize our experience through language. We make things real by naming them aloud. But there is a difference between naming something to understand it and naming something to be seen, carrying it. The first is clarity, the second is performance, and the line between them is thinner than you think. Think of a flame in its first moments, just lit still building. The heat not yet strong enough to sustain itself. If you cup your hands around it, it grows. The shelter gives it time to strengthen. But if you open your hands too early, if you expose that flame to the air of the room before it has built enough heat, it does not blaze, it flickers, and sometimes it goes out. Your goal is that flame, and the wrong conversation is the open window. This does not mean silence forever. It means silence until the flame is strong enough that no wind can reach it, until the work is deep enough that a raised eyebrow cannot undo it, until the doing has built a foundation that no opinion can shake. A colleague asks what you have been working on. A friend notices you seem different. A family member over dinner asks about your plans, and the pull to share is immediate, the heat in your chest, the words forming, the desire to be known in your becoming. Begin with this. Before you speak, ask one question. Not, will they understand, but is it strong enough to survive their response? If the answer is no, if the flame is too small, still building, still needing shelter, then your silence is not hiding. It is protection. It is wisdom. It is the gardener who does not dig up the seed to show people it is growing. And once you recognize the cost of sharing what is still forming, you begin to see the same pattern in a very different territory. The second is your healing wound. Something hurt you, maybe recently, maybe long ago. But the wound is not closed. It is in the process of closing. The skin is thin. The tissue is new. The pain is not gone, but it has changed from the sharp, immediate kind to the deeper, slower kind that comes with repair. And in this tender state, you feel the pull to talk about it. Not for advice, not for solutions, for relief. The weight of carrying a wound alone is real, and the desire to set it down, even for a moment, even in someone else's hands, is completely human. But here is what most people do not realize. A wound that is still healing does not become lighter when it is shared. It becomes exposed. An exposure in the wrong environment does not accelerate healing, it reopens the cut. Not everyone who listens is capable of holding what you give them. Some people hear your pain and immediately try to fix it, which tells you more about their discomfort than your wound. Some people hear your pain and compare it to theirs, which turns your healing into a competition. Some people hear your pain and repeat it to others, which turns your private process into public information. And some people, without meaning to, respond with a tone or a phrase that lands directly on the wound and makes it fresh again. You know this. You have felt it. You have left conversations about your healing feeling worse than when you entered them. Not because the person was cruel, but because the space was wrong. Because the container was not strong enough for what you poured into it. Here is the distinction. Sharing your pain is not the same as processing your pain. Sharing puts the experience into someone else's hands. Processing keeps it in yours, examined, felt, understood. One requires an audience. The other requires only your own honest attention. Think of a broken bone that has been set. The bone is mending. The cast is on. The body is doing its work. Quietly, invisibly, in the dark. Now imagine someone keeps pressing on the cast. Not hard, not maliciously, just pressing, checking, asking, does this still hurt? And each press interrupts the quiet work the body is doing beneath the surface. Your healing is the bone, and every premature conversation about it with someone who cannot hold it gently enough is a press on the cast. A friend asks how you are doing, really doing. A sibling brings up the old subject at the worst moment. Someone at a gathering with good intentions and poor timing says, "So, are you over it yet?" Begin with this when the pull to share your wound appears. Pause and ask, am I seeking relief or seeking witness? If relief, ask whether this person has the capacity to hold what you are about to give them without pressing, fixing, comparing or licking. If the answer is uncertain, your silence is not isolation. It is the cast that lets the bone do its work. And this leads naturally to a third territory, one even more fragile because it has not yet taken shape. The third is your forming decision. There is a moment in every important decision, before it becomes a decision, where it exists as a feeling, not a conclusion. Not a plan, just a pull, a leaning, a quiet sense that something needs to change, though you cannot yet say what or how. This is the most vulnerable stage of any internal process. The decision has not yet been made. It is forming, the way a shape forms in clay before the hands have finished. And at this stage it is extraordinarily sensitive to outside influence, not because you are weak-minded, because the decision is not yet anchored. It has no roots. It is floating between what you know and what you are beginning to sense. And in that floating state, even a small current, a friend's opinion, a parent's fear, a partner's preference can push it off course. Most people share their forming decisions because they want clarity. They believe that speaking the decision out loud will help them see it more clearly. And sometimes it does. When the listener is rare, when they can hold the unfinished thing without shaping it, when they can reflect without directing. But most listeners cannot do this. Most listeners, when presented with an unfinished decision, do one of two things. They tell you what they would do, which replaces your internal compass with theirs. Or they ask questions that sound neutral but carry hidden weight. But what about your security? Have you thought about what people will think? Questions that do not clarify your direction but introduce fear into it. And fear, once introduced into a forming decision, is almost impossible to remove. It attaches itself to the thing you are building and whispers from inside it. And now you cannot tell, is this my doubt or theirs? Here is the distinction. Seeking counsel is not the same as seeking confirmation. Counsel comes from someone who has no stake in your decision, someone who can hold the question without needing to answer it. Confirmation comes from someone whose opinion you already know. And the act of asking is really the act of borrowing their certainty because your own has not yet arrived. Think of wet clay on a wheel. The hands are shaping, the form is emerging. But the clay is still soft, responsive to the slightest pressure. If someone else touches the wheel while the shape is forming, even gently, even with good intentions, the form changes, not because their touch is wrong, because the clay was not yet firm enough to hold its shape against any touch at all. Let the clay firm, let the decision set, not permanently. You can always reshape it later with your own hands, but give it time to become yours before you let anyone else near the wheel. Someone at work asks, "So what are you going to do?" A partner senses you are thinking about something and presses gently. A friend over coffee says, "You should just decide already." Begin with this when you feel the pull to speak a decision that is still forming. Say instead to yourself or to them, "I'm still sitting with it." That sentence is complete. It requires no elaboration. It protects the clay. And it teaches the people around you something important, that your inner process is not a group project. And once you understand the fragility of what is forming, you will recognize the same vulnerability in something that has already begun. The fourth is your early change. You have started something, not a plan, a shift, a new way of eating, of thinking, of spending your mornings, a boundary you drew, a habit you dropped, a direction you turned toward that for the first time. Feels aligned with who you actually are instead of who you were trained to be. And it is working, quietly, in the privacy of your own days. The temptation to announce it is enormous. Not out of vanity, out of joy. The joy of change is real, and the desire to share joy is one of the most natural impulses a person can feel. But early change is like a seedling that has just broken through the soil. It is alive, it is growing, but it has almost no root system. A strong wind, a careless foot, even too much direct sunlight can end it before it has a chance to establish itself. And the wind in this case is other people's reactions. Not all reactions are harmful. Some people will celebrate your change, and their celebration will be genuine fuel. But some people, and you cannot always predict which ones, will respond in ways that destabilize what you are building. They will minimize it. They will compare it to their own attempts. They will question your consistency. They will wait with a patience that borders on hope for you to fail. Not because they wish you harm, but because your change confronts them with their own inaction, and that confrontation is uncomfortable. Here is the distinction that matters. Transformation that needs an audience is still, in part, a performance. And performance draws its energy from external response, which means that when the response is negative or simply absent, the energy drains. But transformation that happens in silence draws its energy from within. It is self-sustaining. It does not rise with applause or fall with indifference. It continues because it is true, not because it is witnessed. A friend notices you seem different and asks what changed. A family member sees the new routine and says with that particular tone, "Let's see how long this lasts." A co-worker, hearing about your new direction, immediately shares the story of someone who tried the same thing and failed. Begin with this: let the change prove itself before you name it. Let 3 months pass. Let the roots go deep. Let the seedling become a plant that can survive the weather of other people's opinions. And when someone asks, and they will, you do not need to perform your transformation. You can simply say, "Things are going well." The change does not need their understanding to continue. It only needs yours. And this brings us to the last territory, the one that is perhaps the most difficult to protect, because it involves the people closest to you. The fifth is your new boundary. You have drawn a line, maybe for the first time, maybe after years of not having one. A line that says, "This far and no further. This is what I accept. This is what I no longer will." And the line is new, which means it is shaky. Not in your conviction, you are sure, but in your practice. You have not yet built the muscle of holding this boundary under pressure. You have not yet felt what it costs to maintain it when the person on the other side pushes back. The line exists in your mind, but it has not yet been tested in the world. And the worst thing you can do with a new boundary is announce it to the person it is designed to contain before you have practiced holding it in silence. Because announcement invites negotiation, and negotiation in the early stages of a boundary almost always leads to erosion. The other person questions the line, they express hurt, they argue its fairness, they remind you of everything they have done for you. And because the boundary is new, because the muscle is untrained, you bend, not because you were wrong, because you were unprepared for the weight of their response. Here is the distinction. A boundary spoken is a negotiation. A boundary practiced is a fact. When you announce a boundary, you give the other person the opportunity to argue with your decision before you have lived it. When you practice a boundary, silently, to action, you present them not with an idea to debate, but with a reality to observe. And reality is much harder to argue with than intention. Think of a stone placed in a river. The stone does not announce itself to the water. It does not explain why it is there. It does not negotiate with the current. It simply sits. And the water, encountering the stone, does what water does. It moves around it. Not because the stone persuaded the water, because the stone was there, present, unmoved, and the water had no choice but to adjust. Your boundary is the stone, and the practice of holding it, without announcement, without explanation, without debate, is what gives it weight. Not your words, your presence. A parent calls and asks for something you have decided to stop giving. A partner repeats the behavior you have decided to no longer accept. A friend crosses the line you drew in your mind last week, but never spoke out loud. Begin with this. The next time your new boundary is tested, do not explain it, act on it. If the boundary is about your time, simply be unavailable, without the paragraph of justification. If the boundary is about treatment, simply withdraw your presence without the speech about why. If the boundary is about emotional labor, simply stop providing it, without the announcement that you have stopped. The boundary will speak for itself. Through your behavior, through your consistency, through the quiet, steady fact of a person who has decided where the line is and stands on it without needing the other person to agree. And now, look at these 5 territories together. Your unfinished goal, your healing wound, your forming decision, your early change, your new boundary. What do they have in common? They are all in the process of becoming. None of them are finished. None of them are strong enough yet to survive careless handling. And all of them are weakened, not by malice, not by betrayal, but by being exposed before they were ready to the atmosphere of other people's limitations. This is not about building walls. Walls keep everything out, the harmful and the nourishing. This is about building doors, doors that you choose to open with people you have chosen, at moments you have chosen. The difference between a wall and a door is not structure, it is agency. The wall is fear, the door is discernment. You do not need to carry everything alone. You need to carry things with the right people at the right time. And the wisdom is in knowing when the time is right, not when the impulse to share is strongest, but when the thing you are sharing is strong enough to survive being shared. Mastery here does not come from memorizing these 5. It comes from practicing discernment in the small moments, the moment before you speak, the breath before you share. The pause where you ask, is this ready? Am I sharing to process or to perform? Does this person have the capacity to hold what I am about to give them? Those questions, asked honestly and repeatedly, will teach you more than any list ever could. They will become instinct, and instinct, once trained, does not require thought. It operates the way the body operates, naturally, quietly, in the service of your protection. You remove the premature sharing and the goal regains its fire. You remove the callous exposure and the wound continues its healing. You remove the outside voices and the decision becomes yours. You remove the announcement and the change grows roots. You remove the negotiation and the boundary becomes stone. Not everything inside you needs to be shown. Not every truth needs to be spoken. Some of the most powerful things you will ever carry are powerful precisely because they were carried in silence, tended in the dark, protected from the wind, given the time and the space to become what they were always meant to become. Let your life become the evidence, not your announcements, not your explanations, not the conversations where you laid your becoming at someone else's feet and watched them step on it without knowing what they were stepping on. Your life, the quiet discipline of knowing when to speak and when to hold, the strength of a person who does not need to be seen changing in order to change, the fire that burns, not because it was shown to the room, but because it was sheltered long enough to become unextinguishable. That shelter is yours. Guard it well. Begin tonight. Choose one of the 5, the one that is most alive in you right now, and hold it. Just hold it. Let it grow in the dark, in the quiet, in the privacy of your own becoming. That is where all real things begin, in the silence that no one sees. And that silence, if you trust it, will build something that no conversation could.